But at this time, I didn't care. So I'm plopping down next to a tree, unzip my boots, drinking some water, and I start conversating with my cousin. He starts telling me about stuff that he experienced out in Washington, about them getting close to the property and screaming and hollering and making all kinds of crazy noises at night. And I'm like, whoa, really? And he's like, yeah. And telling me how he would get up early and he would go running. And he had pit bulls as pets. And he said there were spots where these dogs would stop and they wouldn't want to go. And he said these dogs weren't scared of nothing. They would kill cougars. You know, these dogs were just like the woods bullies, you know. He goes, there were spots, and then he said there was one time they were screaming and hollering around the house, and the dogs were trying to get up under them. And as he's telling me this story, this crazy whistle comes from the right side. And I think he's heard this before, because when he heard that whistle, we both heard it, but when he heard it, this look came over his face, and he stands up, and he goes, let's move. And I'm like, let me get these boots zipped up, because my feet feel great now, you know. So we start walking back to the main road, and we're getting paced from the left side and the right side now. They're not being sneaky. They're dragging their feet, smashing leaves, breaking sticks, and it's like, yeah, it's time to. I mean, I'm not a runner, so I'm like, well, you're gonna get me. She's gonna get me. So, but I noticed that the closer we got to the main road, they seemed to fall back. And I remember seeing that road, even though the street was probably about 150 degrees, I went over on that black pavement, got on my hands and knees and gave that road a big old kiss. And yeah, that was pretty freaky. That was my first time out.
And then while I was in there, I heard this loud crash, like a big loud noise and then a crash. And I was like really, felt real weird being in there, and so I ran back out to the road, and there was no wind. This was in August. There was no wind. The birds weren't flying. The bugs weren't flying. It was just a completely still day. It was hot, and this live tree I'm going to use the word fallen across the road right in front of my vehicle, and it went across the whole road. And so that was my second day as a researcher. And we do different stuff. Sometimes we'll go out in the wood and I'll just crank up my stereo in my van and just blast it out into the woods. And I got all these colored lights that flash and a disco ball that lights up the canopy of the trees and just make a lot of noise, and a lot of times that's very effective, and they come to us. We don't even have to go out in the woods looking for them. We just park and start a party, and they come to us. And we've had,
for the most part, we set up a lot of audio, quite a bit of audio, and quite a bit of cameras.
Yeah, as soon as we get there, the first thing we do is put out audio recorders. And
how much success have you had with audio recordings?
A ton. I have an enormous amount of audio. Just all different types.
Different types of communication, or just like what?
Some of them are like disgust sounds.
like they walk up to the recorder and just go,
yeah,
and then walk away. And this was a place where a week prior to that, a guy saw a 4-foot tall one run across the road 10 feet in front of his headlights. And he said it was about 4 feet tall. And in that same area, there were owls going off, and this animal an owl sounded, and then this animal, it's like it tried to mimic it, but it wasn't very good at it. It wasn't real practiced at it yet, and it wasn't even close. But
He did it twice.
yeah, and it was real fun. It made us laugh.
Yeah.
And I'm
But
pretty
he was
sure it was
loud.
probably. I'm pretty sure it was probably that 4-footer
Yeah.
that was seen there just a week earlier. That it was just a young one, you know. On that couple of days, 3 or 4 days, we were out there, and there was a lot of us. There was like 6 of us out there, and I saw probably 10 or 12 of them on thermal at night. One day I saw 2 large adult males through a rifle scope at about 150 yards away. The night before, we were on private property. We were invited out there because this person was having issues, and
He was scared to death. He wouldn't
Yeah.
even.
he
that
grew up in
night-
those woods. He grew up in those woods. He used to go out and hunt squirrel,
Yeah, that-
and he would not step foot into them
That
anymore.
night where we were camping, he was there with us. Well, he asked me if I'd walk him back to his house.
Yeah,
So I did. I mean, he was that scared.
but he liked to play his guitar on the porch of the deck of his house, and the woods were right there. And he complained that he would hear stuff out there while he was playing the guitar. And so I'm like, well, show me. Let's go up there, you know. And so this was at night. So he goes in, gets his guitar, he comes out, he sits down, and he starts playing, and I can hear it. I know it was Ginger, the one that we called Ginger, the one we got the picture of the next morning, laughing. It sounded like she was laughing and hitting her, doing this at the same time. And
But this guy, he was petrified of these things for good reason, but remember he said they'll just lay out there behind
and watch him,
Yeah.
like actually close
And
to
he
him.
would freak out telling us, you know.
In another place in Louisiana, a little further north from there, we had what's called an intimidation, where we woke up in the morning, and I got a van, and had a gas, like a propane stove, and first thing I do, I make coffee, you know. So I wake up and I open the doors, and I light this propane stove, and when I do, it makes a big blue flame, and it makes a noise. It goes poof, you know. And at that moment, all of a sudden, we were camped right at the edge of a creek. Right on the other side of the creek, something just huge just stood up and started knocking down trees and breaking
Sound like a
limbs and
bulldozer.
stomping. I mean, like an elephant going through there or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it was huge and loud and it was just trying to scare us away, you know.
It was amazing the amount of noise that thing was making.
But it was coming towards us, and at
Yeah.
first we thought it was coming to kill us, and but then it kind of just passed us and kept going, and then like right after it passed us, it stopped making all the noise, and that was about as scared as
Yeah.
we've been. That night he had a recorder out, and that night it was throwing rocks at us all
Small
night.
rocks, yeah.
And I got a antenna, a big CB antenna on the top of my van, and it's like the top of it's 12 feet off the ground. And he'd actually hit the tip of that antenna to make it go boing, yoing, yoing, yoing.
Yeah, we have that on audio.
Yeah.
They kept,
Accuracy.
yeah, they kept throwing rocks, just tink, tink. You know, the almost the whole nine.
And yet we live.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, we would all agree they travel in creeks. They like creeks. They like water. How many creeks are in the United States? They can hide better than, you know, any of us could imagine. I'm a Marine, and I just amazed that we can't just always find it, you know.
I believe they're tactical geniuses. I also subscribe to the theory that they are autistic savants. And then the coyote.
The coyote was very strange.
We about 5 miles from that spot, we were at the other end, and it was just along a creek. We were down at the other end of the creek, and we found this area where all these four-wheel drive trucks had been in there and just tore up this land. It was like obvious it was a bunch of kids driving their dad's trucks, because they were just like tearing over big logs and just going through heavy brush and just tearing up this land. And it looked like there's probably like 5 of these trucks out there, and it looked kind of recent. And so we were kind of walking out of that area, and on the 2-track where these four-wheel drive trucks were using to get in and out of that area, right in the middle of the 2-track, there was this coyote, a dead coyote that had been turned inside out and tied into a knot, and left right in the middle of that road where those four-wheel drivers come in to that area.
That's it.
And and it was pretty, I mean, I cannot imagine a human being doing that kind of violence on an animal.
Why it would rip its head open, like, from its jaw.
It broke its face in half.
Yeah.
It didn't just break the lower jaw, it literally broke the whole face, and then you could tell it reached down its throat and took out all the internal organs, and then a little tuft of fur was sticking out where its throat was, that was its asshole. And then it had tied it all in a knot and left it there. And to me, that was a statement. I mean, I'll never know who or what did that, but I got a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
That me and my wife came down, didn't really experience anything as far as hearing or seeing or whatever, except the game camera. I don't know what, maybe it was a bear, but what could bury that chain that deep into that tree and literally pull it? I mean, it pulled the chain through that, and I know it's made of stamped metal or whatever, but it still ripped. I mean, it just pulled those lengths, right through that little theft-proof box like it was nothing. Like I said, the chain is still in the tree to this day. If we go back, I can show y'all. And then we found that the camera 250 yards from where it was at. Now, I know bears are not, notorious for messing with game cameras, but that's a long way for a bear to carry a camera. Maybe it was, I don't know. But then, after that, we kind of picked and joked, and it was all kind of fun and games, until the track. When he found the track, that changed everything.
That was after all the whooping.
Yeah.
Next morning where they whooping.
Now, the only thing I had that was odd was the one on the river with the hog dog, but
Yeah.
But see, that's the bad thing. That's the part where,
Now you got to question everything.
yes, because like I'll give you an example. I'm not going to drag this out, but like me and him were hunting groves in Texas, 1989, something like that. You could have heard a pin drop. You could have heard a pin drop. No wind, no nothing, total silence. A day that a hunter hates. Like you hate those days. You know what I mean? Because if you even breathe hard, something hears it. And all of a sudden, to my right, this tree breaks down. Well, maybe it was just a tree falling. And for my whole life, that's what it was. Until that damn track. Until that stupid track. That track changed everything. Because then you're like, well, maybe this, maybe that. Or that time, we ran up on my hog dog. You know, that dog was thrown as high as a 2-story house. I mean, I've hunted a lot of hogs, and I've seen them toss dogs in the air, but you're talking about 25 feet. And my whole life, that was just must have been a tough ass hog until that track. The best way I can explain is this: is where the water feeds from. There's these little. Imagine these little rice paddies in Vietnam. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
They're on different levels.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the water feeds in from the top of the mountain, and it comes down, and it'll hit one spot, and it'll gather water. It'll make like a little paddy,
Right.
and they'll wallow in it. And well then that water still leaks down, and it'll go down to another spot. You know, so there's a series of wallows. So anyway, so I'm coming up and I'm following the wallows, and then where it kind of originates from, there's a big group of cottonwoods, or I say cottonwoods. What are them big trees?
That's what they are.
Cottonwoods, is that what it is?
Well, yeah.
Anyway, there's these big cottonwoods. So I'm coming up and to the same spot where I drew back on that one elk. And when I turn, I look up. To me, when I looked up, and he knows because he can visualize it where I'm at. But whenever I looked up, to me, I saw what looked like. I'm not gonna say it was a Bigfoot, but I saw something just really big, tall, black. You know, go up. I mean, just head up into that above where that wallow is.
You're not talking 200 yards from where I seen that track.
Oh yeah, it's not far. No,
About
it's
200
not
yards.
far. You're just a little bit far. You're a little bit down.